Let's talk about the genetics of ALS. I know, it's a topic that can feel incredibly overwhelming, especially if it's touched your family. It just comes with so many heavy questions. So think of this as your guide, a straightforward walkthrough of what genetic counseling is all about and what it might mean for you.
ALS is in my family. What now? I mean, that's one of the most powerful questions anyone can face. And trying to find the answer can feel like you're lost in a maze. Our goal here is to give you a map. We're going to break down what genetic counseling is, how it actually works, and how it can arm you with the information you need to move forward. So let's start with the puzzle itself.
All right, so section 1, the genetic puzzle of ALS. To really get what counseling is, you first have to understand the science it's all built on. Let's take a look at the genetic landscape of the disease. Okay, so the first thing to know is that ALS isn't just one story. For the vast majority of people, about 90 to 95%, it's what we call sporadic. That just means there's no known family history of the disease. But then there's that smaller slice, right? About 5 to 10%. That's familial ALS, where we can see a clear inherited link running through a family. So let's get really clear on the difference. Familial ALS, that's what happens when the disease clearly runs in the family, usually tied to a single gene that gets passed down. Sporadic ALS seems to pop up out of the blue with no obvious family link. But, and this is absolutely crucial, sporadic doesn't mean non-genetic. Even in those cases, there can still be genetic factors that play a part in a person's risk. So let's meet the main characters in this genetic story. Scientists have found a few key genes that are linked to ALS. The most common one you'll hear about is C9orf72. A really big breakthrough was the discovery of SOD1 way back in the 90s. That really opened the floodgates for all this research. And then there are others like TARDBP. Put simply, these genes are like the blueprints for keeping our nerve cells running properly. A mutation is kind of like a typo in that blueprint, and that typo can mess up the cell's instructions and eventually lead to disease. So, you've got all this complex science, but how do you actually make sense of it for your own life? Well, that's where we bring in the human side of this whole equation. Let's talk about your genetic guide. So who is a genetic counselor? They're a really unique kind of healthcare professional. You can think of them as having one foot planted firmly in the hard science of medical genetics, and the other foot planted just as firmly in psychological counseling. Their job really is to be your translator, to take all that complex genetic code and turn it into information that's clear, that's understandable, and that you can actually use. So what actually happens in one of these sessions? Well, it's a really supportive, structured conversation. They'll start by building a super detailed family history, kind of like a medical detective. Then they'll educate you, breaking down these big, tricky ideas. They will walk you through the pros and the cons of getting tested, helping you figure out what feels right for you. And maybe the most important part, they give you a safe, confidential space to talk through all the feelings that come up, because trust me, there are a lot of them. And that brings us to a really, really important point. The counseling itself is one thing. The actual lab test, that's something else entirely. Okay, let's be super clear on this. Counseling is the conversation. It's the whole process of understanding the information and making a decision. Testing is the lab procedure. It's analyzing your DNA from a blood or saliva sample. Here's the key. You can have counseling without ever getting a test. The counseling is there to support you, no matter which path you end up choosing. The genetic tests we have today are incredibly powerful. It's not like the old days where you looked for just 1 or 2 genes. Now these modern panels can screen for dozens of genes linked to ALS, all at the same time. And while that technology is amazing, it also means the results can be really complex, which is exactly why having an expert to help you interpret them is so critical. And here is a perfect example of why you need that expert guidance. Sometimes a test comes back with something called a variant of uncertain significance. What that means is, yeah, they found a change in your DNA, but scientists just don't know yet if it's harmless or if it's something that could actually cause disease. Can you imagine getting that result without a counselor to explain it? It would be so confusing and frankly terrifying. Now, when a test does find a known mutation that causes the disease, we can talk about how it gets passed down. For a lot of the main ALS genes, the pattern is what's called autosomal dominant. All that really means is if a parent has that gene mutation, each one of their children has a 50-50 chance of inheriting it. It's literally a coin flip for every single child.
But, and if you remember one thing, remember this. Inheriting a gene is not the same thing as inheriting a disease. This idea is called reduced penetrance, and it's so important.
It means that even if you carry a known ALS gene, it is not a guarantee that you will get sick. Your genetics are about risk, not destiny.
All of this uncertainty, it really brings us to the heart of the matter, the deeply personal, emotional, and ethical side of all this genetic information. Genetic counselors are trained to help people deal with some incredibly tough feelings. One of them is something called anticipatory anxiety. It's that constant nagging fear about what the future holds if you test positive for a gene before you have any symptoms at all. It's just the sheer weight of knowing, and counselors can give you tools to help you carry that weight. And the emotions can be tricky even when the news is good. Imagine this. You test negative for the gene that runs in your family, but your brother or sister tests positive. That relief you feel for yourself can get all mixed up with this really profound sense of guilt. It's called survivor guilt, and it just goes to show how this information can send ripples through an entire family. So it all comes down to this one question, doesn't it? If you could find out your genetic risk before any symptoms ever appeared, would you want to know? And there is absolutely no right or wrong answer to that. Some people feel empowered by having that knowledge. Others would much rather not know. A genetic counselor's job is to respect your personal choice, your autonomy, 100%. And there are other ethical layers to peel back too. Like, how do you tell your relatives that they might also be at risk? When do you tell them? Who else should you share this with? Counselors also help you understand your legal rights, like protections against genetic discrimination for things like health insurance or your job, so you can make all these decisions feeling confident and protected. So, with all this complexity, you might be wondering, why even go through it? Well, because this knowledge isn't just about risk anymore. It's about power. It's about how genetics is completely reshaping the future of treatment and personal choice. This right here is a total game changer. For the first time ever, we have new therapies being developed that are designed to target a specific genetic mutation, like the ones for the SOD1 gene. Knowing your genetic status could be the actual key that unlocks the door to a cutting-edge clinical trial and a treatment that's personalized just for you. It puts you right at the forefront of the research. This genetic information is also empowering people when it comes to family planning. There are options now, like prenatal testing or even testing embryos during IVF, that give families with a known mutation more control over their future. And again, a counselor's role is never to push you toward one option, but just to give you clear, non-judgmental information so you can make the choice that feels right for you and your values. So, if we boil it all down, here's the bottom line. Genetic counseling is the human bridge. It connects that incredible, fast-paced world of scientific discovery with the real-world human needs of patients and their families. It turns complex data into compassionate, personal guidance, giving you the power to make truly informed decisions. And that really just leaves us with one last powerful thought. We are the first generation in history that can read our own genetic blueprint in this much detail. So the question is no longer just what our DNA says about us. The real question is, with this knowledge in hand, how will we choose to write our own future?